So, you want to know more about the secret text of this format? Keep in mind, Benny, I don't just give out these secret texts to these formats. Had you have come as a friend, things would have been different. You didn't even compliment me on my new hat. I tell you what, on the day of my daughter's wedding, I do this to you as a favor. And I may ask for a favor myself that may never come. But when it does, if it does, I expect you to do it in haste. Capiche?
What's going on with y'all, big dog? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! I hope that your day is going phenomenal. And if it isn't, well, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. Speaking of such, we are gearing on up to get into that Battle of Chaos format, getting in knee deep with in-life events coming up, and of course Remote Duel, as well as every other event that's been flying around. I bet you already wonder, what are some cards that you could be playing that will steal you some games? Well, no worries, big dog. Today I'm going to be going over some super secret strategies that are going to be amazing. But if you just so happen to want to pick these cards up and you're going to a TCG player, make sure you use my link. That would be amazing. I'll list it down below, not only in the comment section, but in the description. So with all that being said, I want to talk about these secret tech cards that can completely change the tide of your format, possibly even beat some decks that you've been struggling with. Okay, so before I start talking about the first card, I want to say, are you on your hand trap game? We already know cards like Ash Blossom and Nibiru are extremely popular, and then there's the card that's Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, which has been making its way back into competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! But do you know every card that can win you games right now? There are actually some really good hand traps in Yu-Gi-Oh! That you don't know about, and I'll be able to explain these particular cards. The first one is Ghost Bell in Haunted Mansion. Now, Ghost Bell is an amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Card that allows you to negate the activation of a card that adds from the graveyard to the extra deck, hand, or deck, special summon from the graveyard, or banish from the graveyard. A couple of things I want to talk to you about is that if the card does it for cost, meaning that if it says banish this card from the graveyard, semicolon, anything before that semicolon is the cost, then Ghost Bell cannot negate it. It only can negate it the effect of a card that includes that. To help you out with a little bit of a visual aid, this card can negate the effect of Monster Reborn because it does have an effect that's special summon from the hand or the graveyard, very much within the scope of Ghost Bell. But what this card wouldn't be able to stop is the effect of a card like Phantom Knight Boots, as yes, it does banish from the graveyard, but that is an activation requirement or cost. With that being said, Ghost Bell is extremely good inside of this format for a few reasons. There's cards like Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer, which will use its effect to attempt to special summon a Destiny Hero monster from the graveyard to the side of the field. You can Ghost Bell that, preventing him from summoning himself back, which is one of the deadliest things about Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer. Also, if your opponent uses a monster like Water Enchantress of the Temple, even if Rite of Air Meister isn't in the graveyard, and even if Water Enchantress of the Temple is in the hand, you can use Ghost Bell in Haunted Mansion to negate it. Now, I bet you're wondering, Callie, how exactly does that even work? Rite of Air Meister isn't even in the graveyard. Well, because how Enchantress of the Temple operates, there could be a point in time where your opponent would send a Rite of Air Meister from the deck to the graveyard and still be able to resolve the effect of that Water Enchantress of the Temple to be able to add said Rite of Air Meister from the graveyard to the hand, and that's why you can negate it. And basically, to break it down a little bit further, if the card could find itself in the graveyard at the time of resolution, then yes, Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion can negate it, unlike the Drytron monsters, which, if they activate in hand, then they're in hand. Ghost Bell has so many amazing applications inside of this format, mainly because there's so much special summoning in the graveyard, and then of course there's that one of Call by the Grave. I'd have to say that if you are playing multiples of hand traps inside of your deck, to consider playing Ghost Bell, as it can steal you some games against those ghouls that try to summon themselves from the graveyard. Speaking of graveyard, there is another hand trap that deals with that. Meister is an amazing Yu-Gi-Oh card in this format, almost the exact same way how Ghost Bell is. What Meister does is when a card effect is activated in the graveyard, you can discard this card and negate that card effect. Now, this card is slightly different than Ghost Bell in Haunted Mansion. Ghost Bell in Haunted Mansion can be activated in a damage step, as it does negate the activations of cards. This card cannot, it only negates the effect. Regardless, Meister has somewhat of a bigger scope than Ghost Bell. Not only can it negate the activation of Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer in Graveyard, it can also negate the activation of Phantom Knight's Boots. Because it does activate in the graveyard regardless of where it went, you can still use Skullmeister to negate the effect. I gotta also say, Skullboy is 1700 attack, so if you ever needed to, you can always normal summon him like Dark Magician and attack your opponent's life points to 0. Duh! There are some pretty big trade-offs that Skullmeister has over Ghostbelt and vice versa, such as being able to negate the activation of cards and also stop cards that would special summon from the graveyard activating on the field, as opposed to being able to activate multiple times in a turn with Skullmeister and being that 1700 body on top of stopping any card effects that activate in the graveyard regardless of their effects.
But if I were to throw my hat into this particular ordeal, I would have to say, there's another card that is really good. DD Crow is the equivalent of sleeping with the fishies. This card allows you to banish any card in the graveyard and doesn't need the activation of effect to happen. I gotta say, DD Crow is my type of a card. Not only can it be searched with cards like Tri-Brigade Charade, provided that you have one BBW banished, that's Beast, Beast Warrior, Winged Beast. This card can also be activated at any given time before your opponent wants to even get that effect. DD Crow is 100% the equivalent of Cement Shoes because that's exactly what the card gets before it ever hits the field. Also, if that damn Outback Cali can go ahead and give out ratings, then of course I can. I'd have to give all 3 of these cards a solid 5 out of 5 squamadas because there's a lot of graveyard effects that need to be sleeping with the fishies.
Thank you very much, Mafia Cali. I appreciate it. I didn't do anything. I promise you I'll have your money back. Don't break my knees. But in case you wanted Graveyard to stay completely silent, just like how you should around that guy, then Silent Graveyard is your card. What this card does is it allows you to discard 1 card from your hand, and cards in the graveyard cannot be activated. Think of it as Abyss Dweller, except a quick play spell. The Graveyard of Silencio is an amazing card. Not only does it stop your opponent from gaining that important graveyard effect, it stops all graveyard effects for the duration of the turn. This can be really good against some of the top decks like Phantom Knight, Outlich, even sometimes Sword Soul when they want to use those important Tenye cards, kind of like another card I could have included in the meta counter guide. So of course, if you want to be able to beat some of the top meta decks, I do have a meta counter guide that you could be checking out. But Silent Graveyard is perfect for a strategy that doesn't care about giving cards up from their hand and doesn't need cards in the graveyard themselves. It can shut off some of the top tier decks inside of Yu-Gi-Oh! Just long enough for you to be able to make a board that they can't beat. Now, one thing that I've noticed about Yu-Gi-Oh! Is that players have been summoning quite the bit of monsters. Recklessly, may I add. I have to say that their logic is kinda sound. Well, if you open a kaiju, you can only kaiju 1 of these monsters. If you open a lava golem, well, you can only lava golem 2 of these monsters. You didn't think this one through, did you? If you don't mind giving up your normal summon, then I know a card that can solve a lot of these boards in Yu-Gi-Oh! The Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere Mode is an amazing Yu-Gi-Oh! Card. Not only does it rid your opponent's entire board, it can tribute off cards like Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer before they can even use its effect to destroy itself, meaning that you're in the clear zone with that particular card. It also allows you to out monsters that have next turn potential like Battle on the Floor, and what's even worse, if your opponent can't link it off, well, it comes back to you. And you can turn that Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere Mode to the Winged Dragon of Ra. I mean, all right, cool. That might be a little bit of a stretch, but hey, you're not crazy until you tried it, right? Great beast of the sky, please hear my cry. Transform thyself from orb of light and bring me victory in this fight. Envelop your desert with the glow of rage. This is so fucking chewdy, dog. But still do it. Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere Mode is one of the most hilarious cards to drop on your opponent and becomes even more amazing if you don't need your normal summon. You can then construct the board that you want, and then if your opponent gives that sphere mode back to you, well, they may have something coming. But if we're talking about other checks to boards, then I gotta mention another card that is actually really awesome. Alpha the Master of Beasts can single-handedly take out boards. Let's say, for example, your opponent has already artifact scythed you, meaning that they've already used Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer. Well, what you do is you summon Alpha Master of the Beast, you use it to attack over your opponent's Wandering Griffin Rider, and guess what? What's up, DB? What's going on, big dog? Use Alpha Master of Beast to return that Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer back to your opponent's extra deck. Odds are they won't be able to summon the card again, meaning that you got rid of 2 threats and you summoned a very formidable monster. I gotta say, there aren't a lot of alpha dogs in Yu-Gi-Oh right now, but Master of Beast not only can address some of the most popular boards in Yu-Gi-Oh, he also is a 3,000 attack behemoth that is really hard to get over in later games. And lastly, if back row heavy decks like Eldritch are still getting on your nerves, don't worry, I got the ultimate card. Unending Nightmare will be an unending nightmare for those back row heavy decks. Think about all the Gozen matches, the skill drains, the Rival of the Warlords, there can be only one that your opponent will lose because of this card. Unending Nightmare is a continuous trap card that allows you to pay 1,000 life points to destroy spell or trap cards on the field. It's once per chain, not once per turn, keep that in mind. Not only does this card get rid of some of those pesky floodgates that I mentioned before, you can actually use it in response to your opponent's Waquero and Conquistador, attempting to banish cards from your graveyard or destroying cards on your field, and guess what? It's a continuous trap card, that thing going to the graveyard. Unending Nightmare is every back row heavy player's nightmare. This card literally obliterates their board, and if you can find a strategy that can keep gaining life points, what spell cards, dog? What trap cards? You ain't got nothing.
In this particular situation, you could say, I want their traps dead. I want their monsters dead. I want everything in their graveyard. I want their graveyard to be banished. I want their banished pile to be burned up. I want their burned ashes remain to be thrown in a coffin across the sea, down below in the Marianas Trench, sleeping in the fishies that we don't even know. I think that's what we can say about those decks. And we may be able to agree with that.
And the last card I want to give an honorable mention to, in case you didn't want to see cards banished, well, don't let anything get banished. Imperial Iron Wall prevents all cards from being banished whatsoever. Now this card is 100% risky because cards like Destiny Hero Phoenix Enforcer can destroy it, but if you can protect this card, oh boy. This card pretty much stops every single competitive Yu-Gi-Oh deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! That's the reason why I think this card is a secret tech card, because you're probably playing a deck that this card will hurt too. But if you can find that right deck that Imperial Iron Wall can really mesh with, on top of being able to stop some of the top decks and being able to protect it, this card can win you games. And that is all that I have for these secret tech cards that can win you games. Let me know if there's some other cards that you could be playing or that you are playing to great success. I'm pretty sure the community would love to hear them. Also, if you want to see more amazing TheCaliEffect content, go ahead and check out these videos, as I'll catch you on the next one. Envelop the desert with your glow. Wait, how the fuck does this go?